Friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project. That is Huck L. Berry, yes, the executive producer and the real brains behind this outfit. That's what she'll claim. But she goes, "Hey Dad, don't kid around about that. You know I'm smarter than you." And sometimes, folks, I'm not kidding you. I think she is. These dogs are super smart, but they have this real obstinate streak to them. That they do things on their own time. Huck, you're a good girl. They'll get around to doing whatever you want them to do, but it's just it's a testament of patience between her and I at times. All right. Thank you for being here. You are appreciated. By the way, Missing 411 National Parks, Washington State, that is a very, very highly rated movie. Came out with it in March of this year. Please go watch it on Amazon. We need more reviews on that movie. Yes, we do. So if you've watched it, please leave a review. If you haven't watched it, go over to Amazon and watch it for me and us. We need views. And yeah. And then our other movies are available on Tubi, Tubi. Missing 411, Missing 411 The Hunted, Missing 411 The UFO Connection are over there on Tubi. This is going to be an interesting show for you. We'll talk about missing persons cases. This is an all-new show, all new data. It's called Mileage. And for people that are kind of new to the channel, this is going to be a stunner. People that have been around, new cases, but you've heard this before, what I'm going to tell you. And before we get going on that, I've got some very interesting cases to talk to you about. First one, I'm not looking for these, but they keep coming up. Another bear mauling case. Kenai, Alaska, July 9th at 4:54 a.m., local residents in the area of Carluck Avenue and Boretide Drive in Kenai exited her front door to take her two dogs outside. She encountered a brown bear accompanied by two cubs. A brown bear in Alaska is essentially a grizzly bear, which had climbed over the fence in her front yard. One dog ran back into the house, and the other dog ran away from the front door in an effort to protect the dog in the front yard. The woman then retrieved a shotgun from inside her house, fired 3 or 4 rounds trying to scare the bears away. The sow then attacked the woman while on her front deck. Another individual at the residence exited the house and screamed and yelled at the bear, which scared it away. She then moved the victim inside the house. The victim sustained serious injuries from the bear and was transported by helicopter to an Anchorage area hospital. Alaska wildlife troopers and Fish and Game visited the scene and collected samples left behind by the bears. Why were they there? This is the key. We know about this in Montana, and if you have these in your yards, you're foolish. Several bird feeders in the yard have appeared to have been disturbed and accessed by the bears prior to the attack. Alaska troopers and Alaska Fish and Game are requesting reports of any brown bear sightings in the area to call blah, blah, blah. So, where is that house? This is the location of the residence. Right here. Right across this river, big city. Over here, big city, Soldotna. This is a neighborhood right here. A lot of homes. Not that far from the wilderness, but still, neighborhood, big city, neighborhood. This isn't a very populated area, and they have brown bears coming in. I hope the woman's okay. They didn't supply any more updates on her, but happily somebody else came along and scared the brown bear away. A lot of weird attacks this year. Very weird. Over the years, I've had at least 10 reports come in from police officers in California alone about their incidents with Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And they're reluctant to put their names out there because they're afraid that they're going to get demeaned or harassed or made fun of. And I get it. I used to be there. I used to be one. Well, a man sent me in a very interesting report. He's a retired CHP officer. I won't say his name. He asked me to withhold it. He did almost 30 years with the CHP, retired recently. And this is his story. He said, I retired because California felt like it was getting too hard to protect our assets and there was an overwhelming scrutiny. He spent time in an area as an investigator and he spent time patrolling remote areas. See, as the CHP, they also take highways in the state and they patrol those. It's not just freeways. Before I get going on this guy's story, let me tell you a quick story that I can guarantee many of you have never heard. But in the late 1960s, Highway Patrol was working a two-man car, which they normally do on graveyard shift, 10 at night till 6 in the morning. And this two-man CHP crew was driving on Highway 50 just west of South Lake Tahoe, near Echo Pass. And it was snowing. And as they come up, they see a Bigfoot cross in front of them on the road. And they pull over to the side of the road and they track this thing into some cabins that were not occupied. The story came out and it was forwarded to me by some other CHP officers. CHP has, I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have a magazine that came out every month. It was a good one, and that talked about incidents around the state and retirees, typical CHP kind of stuff. I was always hoping that this story would make that magazine. It never did. Unfortunately, law enforcement has this closed-in version of the topic. They don't realize how prevalent it really is and how many great frontline officers have had incidents with it. That is just one small story of the CHP, two of them at one time seeing a Bigfoot. Now, this is another story. Here it is. In early September 2017, the date is based on pictures I have of the trip. I was camping at Troy Meadows in Sequoia National Forest with another CHP officer. Troy Meadows is on the Kern Plateau in the Golden Trout Wilderness area. Again, a wilderness area means you can't drive cars in there, you can't drive motorized bikes in there, etc. The other officer was my former partner, but I think was a sergeant at the time. The reason I sometimes camp there is because it's never full, requires no reservations, and is a quick turnaround for a 2 to 3 day trip. I've camped all over California my whole life. I had no other experiences at other locations. I previously hunted and fished, so being in the woods is not new to me. I was an Army medic in the reserves where I've trained in the field. On this trip, I was particularly hot during the day, but cold at night. I think it's around 8,300 feet. Troy Meadows has a series of campsite loops. We were in the last loop on the creek, and directly next to the walk in a campsite behind the creek was a fenced meadow with cattle. I assume it was leased by a rancher, but don't know for sure. I never saw anyone tending the cattle. Sometime around midnight, I was wakened by a car driving through the loop. The headlights hit my tent as it drove past, but I heard it continue around the loop and leave. It may have been a ranger patrolling or a late arrival, but did not stop. The campground was about 85% empty. There were only one or two other people camping in our loop, and there were several sites away in motorhomes. As I lay there awake, I heard what I thought were bowling ball-sized boulders rolling down the creek. I'd say maybe 30 yards away. The creek was an absolute trickle, ankle deep at best, so no way was the current causing this. I thought, who is letting their kids play in the creek? It's cold out there. I'd guessed in the 30s. Minutes later, I heard mumbling. I could not make out what it was, but it sounded like kids babbling or mumbling. I thought the same thing. Whose kids are out there in the creek? It's freezing cold. It's late. It's dark. My partner, my friend, was still sleeping. I stood up and looked out the mesh at the top of the tent and saw no flashlights. I stood still and listened. I could hear the mumbling, but not making it out. About 5 minutes or so, it stopped. My friend woke up a bit later with some heartburn and he took some medication. I got up to take a leak and shine my flashlight at the creek, but didn't see anything. We both laid back down on our cots. We lay there talking briefly when we heard the cattle in the adjacent field go absolutely nuts. I have zero experience with cattle, but I could tell they were clearly upset. Both of us could hear them run from one location to another repeatedly. It sounded like several small stampedes. I commented that there has to be a bear or mountain lion over there, and he agreed. They eventually calmed when we heard a loud roar. The volume of the roar is what shocked me the most. It was just down the creek from our tent. It was for 4 to 5 seconds and went up and then down in volume and pitch. I said, "What was that?" My friend said, "I don't know, but if it comes here, we're going to have to kill it." We were both armed. The extent of this roar was way too loud to be human. If I had to just compare the volume to something, I'd compare it to the volume of a loud motorcycle. At the time, I'd heard nothing like it before. We both laid there uneasy with our guns close by, falling asleep. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day we talked about it, and he told me it was Bigfoot. At first he seemed reluctant to tell me, but then he just came out and said it. He told me a story of camping near a pack station as a kid. I think he said it was McGee Creek south of Mammoth. Anyway, something similar happened with the horses late at night. He said the next day they found large Bigfoot prints in the area. He said he still has Polaroid pictures of them, which I have not seen. He is a no bullshit type, and I previously trusted him with my life, so I have no reason not to trust him. Before this, I did not give Bigfoot any thought. My son played baseball in Washington, and I've previously laughed when one of his teammates told me about Bigfoot in the woods. After this, I began to research it on the internet. The closest sounds to what I heard were some distant recordings made in Sequoia. The sounds I heard were louder, clearer, and closer. I just saw your video with Joe Hauser. The roar he describes at the beginning of the video is similar to what we heard. He talks about his son playing in Washington and somebody else telling him about Bigfoot. When Ben played in Miami, Ohio, one of the captains of his team had a brother that was at a camp in Michigan. They came to me and told me this. They go, "Dave, we know you've done some research on Bigfoot. We want you to know that we know it's not BS." I kind of said, "Oh, wow." And he said, no. My brother had an incident happen. He goes, "If you want to meet him, I'll introduce him to you at a game." I said, "Yeah." Anyhow, the story was that the brother was at some kind of camp. Kind of at night, he got out. He was walking to the bathroom, and there in the not too far distance, away under a light, was a huge 9-foot tall Bigfoot covered in hair. And he goes, "My brother would never lie." And he goes, "It's the truth." I think it kind of made Ben feel better because one of the leaders on the team validated that what I did. And from that point on, I had parents coming up to me, friends coming up to me, telling me stories about Bigfoot. So, funny the association of kids and sports. Back up several months to May this same year, my son and I were camping at a Fish Creek campground. Troy Meadows was still closed due to snow. Just like Troy Meadows, Fish Creek is on Sherman Pass Road, and the two are very close. Again, the campground was nearly empty. because the road had just opened that weekend. We camped for a night, but decided to leave a night early because snow was expected later. We got up and went on a hike at a place called Jackass Creek Trail. A mile or so into the hike, I began to feel uneasy and felt a sudden urge to leave. We turned around, hiked back to the truck, and left. Never said anything to my son about the feeling I got. I just told him I didn't want to leave the truck unattended and fully packed. I did not see or hear anything unusual, but have never got a feeling like that in the woods before. I worked in a rural area at the end of my career, and so I've spent a lot of time alone. I do not spook easily. We told a few people about what we heard that night, with most thinking we were full of crap. As a result, we don't tell many people about it, as well as following you in your videos and your movies. Great job. So you don't judge or laugh at any of the experiences I hear about anymore. Your videos and movies are great. Your son would be proud. Your work gives us credibility, and I appreciate that. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. First of all, thanks for trusting me with your story. Now, far too many times in my career, friendships, relationships, I've met people just like this. Afraid to tell somebody else, afraid to be embarrassed. Hopefully we have a time in the not too distant future that these stories will be able to come out and people won't be so embarrassed about telling them. At the beginning, when I first came out with the Hoopa Project and Tribal Bigfoot, the kids were a little reluctant to admit that I wrote those. They didn't want to be harassed. Ben was the first one that came out and actually read one of those books and said, "Dad, I believe you." And he was at that age where he wasn't afraid to tell anyone. Made me feel good. So, I know I have a whole bunch of police officers, firefighters, game wardens following me. I'd like to hear your stories. It does add credibility because of what the job you did, and you make it through an entire career like that. You are appreciated because you did a lot for our society. Thank you. So, what we're going to talk about today is something I have placed in my books in the past. I could write a whole book about this. Mileage. Dave, what do you mean about mileage? So if I wrote a book about hikers that disappeared and they were found 20 miles from the trailhead, you'd think, well, Dave, that's kind of a stupid book. Everyone walks a lot of miles to get away from everybody in the woods. What if I wrote the book about toddlers, children, that were found fantastic number of miles from the point they were last seen? Well, a lot of you, when I wrote about those things in the past or talked about them, you said, well, maybe an eagle carried the child away. So I just did an online archival search of eagle takes child. You know how many newspaper reports I found about that? None. Now I know that there's probably, I'm going to admit it, there's probably a case or two in the last 200 years where this has happened. It is so unbelievably rare that I don't care to even entertain it. But in Canada, April 15th, 1921, the Victoria Daily Times. Did eagle carry off a small child? This is the weird story. A partial solution of a 1914 mystery has been yielded by the discovery of charred skeletal, it says charred, skeleton of a child's body on the highest mountain in the Benachie Group, Aberdeenshire, known as Mither Tap. A child of 2 disappeared while at play, and a search of a radius of 30 miles proved futile. The belief being that the child had been carried away by gypsies or else by an eagle. On March 21st, the body believed to be that of the missing child was found 2 miles from the cottage from which the disappearance took place by a man salving timber on the mountain, which was swept by a fire last year. It is believed that the baby was carried away by an eagle because it was too young to have wandered 2 miles up a steep hillside deeply covered with undergrowth. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, just because you don't think that child could get up there by any other means, I think it's possible that a lot of things could have gotten that child up there. No, I don't mean Bigfoot, Dogman, those things. Because as I've stated 100 times, I'll state it again. In the last 125 years, I can't find a credible case of Bigfoot taking anyone. I've said it over and over and over. Even though people from other organizations have said I've implied that, I have never implied that in any of my books. I give you facts, I let you decide what happened. Now, how did that child get there? Well, that's a very good question. Do I think that child climbed that mountain? No, I don't. But if you've watched my first 3 movies in order, it's important to watch them in order. They're all free to watch on Tubi, T-U-B-I. Missing 411 is a movie about small children covering fantastic distances. Missing 411, The Hunted, it's the second one. And then there's Missing 411, The UFO Connection. If you really want to get facts lined up in a row, you watch those 3 movies. So, again, I don't think an eagle took that child. But that's my own personal opinion. Opinions are based upon the amount of research you've made in a specific area. Now, let's get straight to mileage. This is in the Kewaskum Statesman, July 21st, 1900. The headline, Lost Child Found Miles from Home. Grand Rapids, Wisconsin. Mystery is cleared up. Suspicion of foul play. There is always a suspicion of foul play in these cases. Why? Because your mind can't formulate an answer as to what might have happened. The 3-year-old child of F. Terzushu, who has been lost in the woods near Vesper, Wisconsin, since last Thursday, was found last evening still alive. The child was found by a man who was out hunting. He heard a faint cry of a little child who seemed to be calling for its father. He stopped and listened to locate the sound. He found the child and carried him home. And 2 doctors from here were immediately summoned. And the last reports, the chances were very good of the recovery. The child was found near Hanson, Wisconsin, where there had been no search for her. The fact that the child was alive is wonderful, as she has been exposed to the weather for 6 days, has been raining very hard. There is still a suspicion of foul play, as it seems incredible that a child of only 3 years old could go so far away from home in the thick woods and underbrush which is covering this country. Heavy rains. Now, you think, distance-wise, well, let's think about that. Disappearance of the child from Vesper and is found near Hanson. Okay? Here is Vesper, Wisconsin, and here's Hanson over here. Now, the way the air miles, it's probably no more than 2 miles. But I want you to look very carefully. Between this point and this point, 1, 2, 3 bodies of water that that child would have had to have crossed to get into this area of Vesper. That dog don't hunt. That is not going to happen. Now, I did a search of that area. There's actually no crime reported in the 1900s in that area. No crime. Why? Because it's all farm and ranching areas. There's miles of nothing. So how did the child get that distance? Again, it wasn't the distance per se. It was the topography and the crossings that it had to make. Again, this was in July. Do I think the child did that on its own? Not a chance. Do I think that it was kidnapped? Not in the traditional sense, no. Now let's get into some more interesting cases than even that. That was just a warm-up. This was in the Daily Mercury, May 2nd, 1939. Missing child found. Wandered 34 miles. Port Augusta. After being lost, during which it wandered barefoot for 34 miles, the 5-year-old daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Sarks of Anamuka, Australia, Anamuka Station, 60 miles from Pimbo, was found on Friday afternoon about 15 miles from the homestead. The story of the search was day-to-day. Inspector Personage, who, with Constable Golan and a tracker, returned at the end of the week from Anamuka Station. He said apparently the child had gone in search of her father, who was working on a fence some distance away from the homestead, became lost. A message was sent to Port Augusta for assistance. A police party sent out with little hope of finding the lad. I found the child had walked 34 miles without shoes. She was found 15 miles from home. Although she had been without food and the night had been bitterly cold, the child was little affected. How could that be? How could that be? I think that's impossible. I don't think that she was out there all those days. That's my own educated opinion. Now, in my first movie, Missing 411, that's the title, Survivor Man, Les Stroud is in it. And we talk about search and rescue, and we talk about kids. And he was adamant. Kids never walk a straight line from point to point. They wander, they go different directions. And number 2, they never hike at night. Why? Because you're trained. Darkness is scary. And you're supposed to sleep at night. And kids remarkably do what they're told. So they'll lay down, and maybe at the first sign of sunlight, they'll get up and start moving again. But at night, they don't hike. So think about that. It's not that they're hiking 12, 14 hours a day. No. Next case. The Sun newspaper, September 6, 1931. Cobar, Australia. After wandering for 6 days through tall spear grass between Cobar and Ivanhoe, Baby Shields, age 4, the son of a settler, Mrs. I. Shields of Yathagunda Station, Moskiel, was found this afternoon near Musterers Camp near Hillstrom, 45 miles from home. Yes. His first words to the musterers, many of whom were giving up hope but had joined them and quit work for the day, "Where's my mommy?" A shepherd who for 6 days had been scouring the countryside in a motor car drove the child to the distracted mother. The child was found 45 miles from home, and his clothing had been practically torn from him by the sharp edges of the spear grass. How he managed to get so far is a mystery to the police. The little wanderer told an extraordinary story of having eaten crowfoot, a clover-like grass, and when he entered camp, his mouth was streaked with green. Baby Shields wandered from his father's homestead at 10 a.m. on Monday, and since then, searchers from Ivanhoe and Cobar and big station properties in Yallock, Red Tank, and Trinity had been searching. More than 600 people in dozens of small parties were out there. The child, to the amazement of the musterers, seemed in good health and chatted with them at night. For 5 nights, the intense cold had been wandering aimlessly through the grass, most of which was 6 feet tall. Again, is it possible that he was out there all those nights? Oh yeah, anything's possible. Is it reasonable? No, it's not reasonable. So where was he all those nights? How could he suddenly be in such good condition that it doesn't seem like he was out there all that time? Well, folks, I'm saying to you, he probably wasn't. Probably wasn't. Now, if you're still a little bit amazed by that mileage, hold your taters. July 22nd, 1916, headlines, "A missing child found 90 miles from home. Remarkable endurance." Brisbane, Australia. The Commissioner of Police received a telegram on Monday from Charlesville stating that the child, Nicholas Frosheger, aged 4.5 years, who has been missing since Monday, and this was a Saturday, has been found. The boy reached Alice Downs, 90 miles from Charleville. He was brought back to his home at Charleville and is progressing favorably. Probably no finer record of endurance has ever been recorded other than a long tramp of this 4-year-old boy. He is the son of a wood carter and one of his family of 9. His mother died recently. Dr. Fox states that the boy lived on grass. He was for 120 hours without food and could have gone for another 2 more days. His legs were swollen as a result of his long tramp. He was taken to a hospital for special treatment. 90 miles? Again, I seriously doubt if you and I could do that. Most people just don't have that endurance without food for that amount of time, especially a youngster. I don't care if it's grass or not. I have a really tough time believing, with what I know, that that could be just a walk in the park, let's say. Now, one of the things that I present in many of the conferences I go to is distances traveled by victims post-disappearance. These are all stories in my books. 1987, age 11 years old and missing 411 off the grid. Child traveled 100 miles in 5 days. 1956, 7 years old, in Devil's in the Detail. Child traveled 50 miles in 2 days. I don't believe it. 1931, a 4-year-old in Devil's in the Detail, 45 miles in 5 days. 1938, a 4-year-old, 40 miles in 4 days. 1950, 8 years old and off the grid, 35 miles in 27 hours. I don't even think a trail runner could do that. And this is way out in the middle of nowhere, folks. There's no cars, there's no nothing. 1939, 5 years old, Devil's in the Detail, 34 miles in less than 36 hours. 1916, 4 years old, off the grid, 30 miles in 24 hours. Barefoot. 1917, 4 years old, Devil's in the Detail, 30 miles in 3 days. Now, the question may come up, well, Dave, you're kind of beating a dead horse. Sometimes I have to do that with some people to get them to understand that, oh, this isn't just a one-off. This isn't just one remarkable kid. So as I go down the line, I start at the older kids, and then I get down to 1973, 2 years old, North America and beyond, found 20 miles away. 1936, 2 years old, Devil's in the Detail, 15 miles in 3 days. 1945, 2 years old, missing 411, Western U.S., 15 miles found in a cave. 1985, 3 years old, Devil's in the Detail, 15 miles in 30 hours. There's no way that happened. Again, kids sleep at night. And when they say they're found 30 air miles from point to point, that really meant that they had to have hiked 50 miles. Because as Les Stroud says, they don't walk a straight line, ever. Now, one of the things that is unfortunate is that search and rescue people don't even want to acknowledge these cases because it skews their search parameters so drastically. Yet, within the last 10 years, there have been cases where kids have found outside those search parameters. So, say 95% of the time those search parameters work, but there's a percentage that they don't. And they won't even acknowledge it. They don't even want to talk about this at their conferences. They told me that. I've written papers and said, yeah, this is what I talk about at your conference. They said, no, we don't want you. Just pure facts, but they don't want me. And that's unfortunate because what will happen, kids are going to die. Adults are going to die. So I hope I've changed your paradigm a little bit on small children. Because if you still think that kids could travel those distances, I'm telling you right now, they didn't. Not on their own, not without help. And it wasn't a Bigfoot. It wasn't Dogman. There's no evidence any of those ever took anybody and traveled in those cases. I know you don't like to hear that because many of you listen to podcasts about scary stories involving Bigfoot and Dogman. Friends, all those podcasts never existed before my books came out. And then all of a sudden they jumped all over it because I wrote a few books about Bigfoot. Oh, he means Bigfoot. No, I never did. And I never have. And I've never stated that. And I know people who work at the biggest podcasts on Bigfoot and Dogman, and they've left those podcasts because the stories were fabricated. Take it as you will. You're wasting your time. You're just giving them a lot of airtime to listen to stupid stories that aren't true. Just telling you. I appreciate you being here. And our website, missing411.com. Please go watch that movie, Missing 411, National Parks, Washington State. I think you will find your eyes wide open at the end. And it was a labor of love. Be safe, be kind. Kindness is key. Paulides is out.